1, 2. So actually, I have the good news that I'm just speaking now 2 minutes because the most important guy is Christoph Janz. And the backstory is like, many people know I have been building Pipedrive, and I go around the world and people tell me all the time that the best B2B investor is Christoph Janz. And somehow, and I will later ask from him on the stage that even though we have spoken I think that 7 years, and many people say that he's amazing dude, he never actually invested to Pipedrive. But super happy that finally he found 2 days in his schedule to fly to Estonia and share his extremely unique experience. And believe me, even in Pipedrive story, I totally feel how much this kind of super smart investor can add huge value. So that's why I'm super happy to introduce Christoph Janz, who is now rock star and telling his experience. Please.
Yeah, thanks, Ragnar, and thanks so much for reminding me of probably one of the worst decisions that we did at Point 9, which was not to try really hard to invest in Pipedrive. Yeah, hello, everybody. Tere Pevas, I don't know, is that understandable? It took me a couple of days to learn this. This is the result. Tere Pevas. I know, maybe somebody can say it for me? Ah, okay. Okay, I have to keep learning. Yeah, we're Point 9 Capital. We're an early stage VC, and what that means is that according to most stock photography sites out there, this is how my day job looks like. I don't know if you've seen this meme coming up on Twitter or Facebook in the last couple of days. If not, highly recommend you to take a look at hashtag bad stock photos of my job. It's hilarious, but not now. After my talk, please. So what does Point 9 do? If you've never heard about us, we're an early stage VC, hence the name Point 9. It's a play on software version numbers. We invest primarily in SaaS and online marketplaces, and we invest all over Europe and sometimes also beyond Europe. We've been fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to work with a number of great startups, some of which have become successful companies now. You might remember, or you might know some of these. Again, Pipedrive is unfortunately not there, so we have probably a longer list of great companies that we saw and didn't invest in. We call it our anti-portfolio, but we're also quite proud of our actual portfolio. So I will try to talk about 5 learnings from 10 years of SaaS investing, and I have only 15 minutes. I don't know if there's a timer somewhere, but maybe somebody can give me a shout. Oh, all right, great. Okay, so 13 minutes to go for learnings from 10 years. This is going to be a bit challenging, so I'll try and might talk a little bit fast, and happy to talk to you individually later on. So I'm here today and tomorrow. Feel free to hit me up. First topic is pricing, one of my favorite topics in B2B SaaS because it has such a big leverage. So what you can see here is how pricing typically looks like for a B2B SaaS company. You have an SMB plan, some kind of entry-level plan, and then a higher tier for bigger companies. And typically, the enterprise plan is maybe twice the pricing of your entry-level plan. And now, what I think how you should actually price in most cases is this. So what most founders, I think, should do is ask enterprises for much, much more money and have a way bigger spread between SMBs and enterprises. I think most founders naturally lean to underprice on the enterprise side simply because they have never experienced how it is to work for a large corporation. Everything is incredibly expensive if you're a large company. So you can typically just add a 0 to whatever you ask an enterprise company for. Obviously, also founders know all the bugs and deficiencies of the product, and that might lead them to be afraid of asking for a lot of money. And maybe it's if you're a product or engineering-led company, you might also just not enjoy talking to customers, and it might make you uncomfortable to ask for more money than you think you might get. But I would really encourage you to try it. There is not much downside, but there is a lot of upside, and we'll talk about it a bit later on, because if you can really increase your pricing, it can really transform your entire business. So that's the first learning. Ask enterprise customers for more money, increase the spread between your entry plan and your higher tiers. Let's talk about customer acquisition and about the how you can scale paid acquisition. On the x-axis of this chart, you see marketing spend, and on the y-axis, you see CACs, meaning customer acquisition costs. And when we look at projections from startups, it quite typically looks like this. So you project marketing spendings to go up over time, and you expect your CACs to stay more or less flat, meaning that you increase your marketing spendings and you get more and more customers at a more or less proportional rate. In reality, it looks much more often like this. And what that means, obviously, is that you're failing or really struggling to increase your marketing spending while keeping CACs under control. And I think this is quite specific to a B2B SaaS. In consumer internet, for example, e-commerce, when you found a channel, it's more likely that you are able to pile a lot of money into it because you can do mass market advertising. You might be able to make TV work for you, and those are highly scalable channels. But in B2B SaaS, that's, in our experience at least, that's quite rare. It's much more natural that you, by definition, in the beginning, you capture the lowest hanging fruits. You just capture the hot demand that's out there and that you can easily capture on Google with PPC and so on. But then these early channels, they exhaust pretty quickly, and then you have to be creative to find new ways to acquire more customers. Sorry, and the learning from that, in my opinion, is that you shouldn't assume that PPC will scale. You really need to invest heavily in product and content. NPS really matters a lot. And if your ARPA, your average revenue per account, is big enough, you should try or consider doing outbound sales. It's not easy to make it work, but if you can make it work, that is one of the more scalable ways to acquire customers. Let's talk about hiring a VP of sales. And for this, I borrowed a chart from Jason Lemkin, who probably a lot of you know. One sec. He wrote a great post about the 48 different types of VP of sales. And I don't know if it's really 48, that's obviously a little bit of a joke, but there is definitely a big truth to that, and that is that the requirements for the VP of sales job change dramatically as you move from one stage to the next. In the very beginning, when you're just getting out of the gate and you have a product but not that many customers yet, you really need an evangelist because you don't have a playbook yet. You might not even have clear product market fit yet. You don't know exactly what your customer looks like, the ideal customer, what the pricing is, and so on. So you need somebody to figure that out. And the ugly truth is that is most likely going to be you, because you probably won't be able to hire somebody who is capable and willing to do that job. So most likely, someone from the founding team or the founders together need to be that first VP of sales and get the company to a few hundred K or maybe $1 million in ARR. And then you should try to find the right VP of sales for the next stage, somebody who can make things repeatable and get you to, let's say, 10 or 20 million in ARR. And here, again, you should not try to find somebody where you hope he or she is going to take you all the way up to 100 million in ARR. If that happens, congratulations, that's great, but you cannot expect it, and you should rather optimize for the right person for the job that needs to be done over the course of the next 18 or 24 months. It's just a very different skill set. The job probably changes completely at least 2 or 3 times from 0 to about 100 million. So yeah, those are the learnings. You are most likely going to be your first VP of sales if you want it or not. And after that, find somebody who can get you to the next stage. All right, let's talk about the idea of getting to 100 million in ARR. This might not be a relevant question for many startups because it might not be your ambition. It maybe, I mean, obviously most startups will never get there, and maybe a lot of startups don't want to really try. But 100 million ARR is kind of like the scale which most venture capital investors look for, just because of their business model. So if you're considering to raise money from venture capitalists, I think you should think about that question, and you should probably only raise venture capital if you think you have a shot at building a company like that. So the way we like to look at that is this. This is a chart which you might have seen before. There are actually some posters hanging around with that chart at the conference. What you can see here is on the right, the ARPA, meaning the average revenue per account in dollars per year on a logarithmic scale. So 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and so on. And on the y-axis, you see the number of customers in thousands, again on a logarithmic scale. So 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and so on. And then on each of these cross sections here, you have one animal that represents one type of customer, one way to get to 100 million in revenues. And the analogy is borrowed from salespeople who often refer to a big customer win as an elephant or a whale. So that's how we came up with this analogy. And this is obviously it's a simplification, and mathematically there is an infinite amount of ways how you can, like on this grid, how you can get to 100 million. But we find it quite useful to simplify it in that way, because if you think about, like, do I need 1,000 or 100,000 customers to get to my goal, that has a lot of implications on pretty much anything. It defines what kind of sales and marketing strategies you can employ. It tells you something about your cost basis and many other things. So for example, if you know that you need 100,000 customers, you probably have to have a product that is somewhat viral, or maybe you can drive customers with SEO, but you probably won't be able to make telesales work at that scale and at that ARPA. However, on the other hand, if you only need 100 or 1,000 customers, and each of them is very, very valuable, then you can probably do direct sales or maybe even enterprise field sales. So the learning here is that you should know what kind of animal or animals you're hunting, and then you have to align your CACs, your customer acquisition costs, and your COGS, your cost of goods sold or cost of service provided, with that ARPA. And there are some companies that have been able and successful in serving multiple of these animals. And sometimes there are synergies, obviously, like if you go into teams and then they become departments and then they become enterprise-wide deployments. And some companies are also able to sell to different types of customers. I think especially for developer-oriented products that can work really well. So if that works, that's great. But if it doesn't come natural, then you should probably think about focusing on maybe just one or two of these types of customer sizes, because it just adds a lot of complexity if you have to serve customers that are so different. The last point here, and that is very closely related to the previous one, is the startup graveyard. I'm bringing up the same 5 animals here again on a somewhat different chart. What you see here on the right are the customer acquisition costs, and on the y-axis you see the lifetime value. And each point on this diagonal line, each animal represents one company that is able to build a very viable and scalable business because they've been able to align their CACs and LTV in a very good, profitable, scalable way. And then what about the corner in the top left? So if a unicorn represents the unlikelihood of building a company that is going to be worth $1 billion or euros, then I think ending up in that corner is so unlikely, so improbable that I would characterize it with a unicorn with 3 heads. And I know 2 companies that managed to end up in that quadrant. One is Dropbox, the other one is Slack. Both of them have virality built into the product, combined with a decent degree of monetization. And it's no surprise that these 2 companies are the fastest SaaS companies ever. Dropbox is the first company ever that got from 0 to $1 billion in ARR within 10 years. Maybe there are a few others, but definitely not many. So that only leaves us with a quadrant in the bottom right, and by now you probably have some guesses what you could find there. This is the zombie land. This is filled with startups who did not find a way to align their CACs with their LTV. It's actually quite typical, and I think we'll maybe talk about this a bit more in the panel about the reasons why startups fail. I think once you have product market fit, then not being able to find scalable customer acquisition channels that are in line with your lifetime value is probably one of the most frequent reasons why you maybe not necessarily fail, but why you kind of get stuck and don't manage to get to the next stage. So if you are in that corner, really there are only 2 things that you can do to get out of there, and one is to increase your lifetime value, the other one is to decrease your CAC. So maybe there is some potential virality in the product that you haven't leveraged yet, or maybe you can increase your pricing or go up market. But if you really want to build a big business and you are in that corner, you have to go either up or left or do a combination of both. That's all I have for now. And if you want to learn more, I have more of these slides at saaslearnings.com, and you can read about what else I've written on theangelvc.net, or send me an email at christoph@point9.vc. Thanks very much.